In this video, we will explore another capability that contributes to personal transformation, that of systemic thinking. Systemic thinking implies seeing the object of study as part of a greater whole, taking into account the relationships among the parts of the system, between the parts and the system as a whole, and between the whole and larger systems in which it is embedded. It also implies accepting complexity and interdependence, and it recognizes that passing problems to another part of the system is not a solution. For example, if a country tries to resolve its problems of radioactive wastes by shipping them to another country to store, this is not a true solution, because it is only passing the problem from one part of the world to another. Systemic thinking contrasts with linear thought. In linear thought, we think that there is only one cause, whereas systemic thinking examines a multitude of interacting factors. Linear thought fragments knowledge into disciplines, whereas systemic thinking integrates knowledge across disciplines. Linear thought isolates pieces of the system to study, whereas systemic thinking looks for the order implicit in the system. And linear thought proposes partial, simplistic solutions, whereas systemic thinking strives to get at the root of the problem by addressing systemic issues. Systemic thinking focuses on three different levels of interpretation: isolated events, patterns, and generating structures. An example could be, if a youth fails an exam, his parents might consider that that is an isolated event. But if he continually fails exams, let's say in English and social studies, they may recognize that it is a pattern, and they may try to respond to the pattern by studying with him before tests. That may work fine for a while, but the day that they do not study with him, he may again fail, because they have not looked at the generating structure which is leading to his failing, which may be something like poor reading comprehension. There are a number of typical generating structures, which Peter Sinhay calls system archetypes, because they appear over and over again. In the case of the student, we can see the archetype of shifting the burden. There is a problem. The student fails exams. The parents treat the system by studying with them, seemingly resolving the problem for a time being. But at the same time, they are less motivated to search for a long-term situation and commit to its application. And so the problem appears again. If instead of treating the symptom, they treat the cause, which will take a much longer time and more effort, but if they help him to develop his ability of reading comprehension, there will be a delay, but the problem is eventually solved. Another common archetype is known as limits of growth. In this case, we are concentrated on growth and doing everything we can to achieve it. But as we progress, opposing processes rise up that keep us from achieving what we want. Although it may seem that the best thing to do is to continue pressing on with the processes of growth, systemic thinking teaches us that the most effective action is to work with the forces of opposition, trying to lessen them. Then the forces of growth can achieve their effect. A concrete example of this happened with the rural school teachers with whom we first worked with transformative leadership. The teachers were teaching transformative, or at that time it was called moral leadership, to the people in the community and the community organizations. And the community was becoming very enthusiastic. However, when traditional leaders saw that enthusiasm, they started opposing what the teachers were doing. They were afraid that the teachers were going to take over their positions. Rather than continuing their efforts in teaching moral leadership, the teachers took the time to reassure the traditional leaders that they had no intention of taking on formal positions of authority. And they also tried to incorporate those leaders in prestigious positions. When that occurred, the traditional leaders, stopped opposing, and the enthusiasm of the community continued to grow. When dealing with many systems archetypes, there are delayed reactions, which we have to take into account. There are two ways to respond to delayed reactions. One is by overreacting, and the other is by giving up. We can give a simple example. If we're taking a shower and the water doesn't heat up fast enough, we sometimes overreact by turning the hot water on full blast. But since the system is slow, it takes a while for the hot water to reach us, and so we overreact, turning the knob even further. So this would be an example of delayed reaction with overreaction. Another example we could take from the pandemic of COVID-19. Let's say that there are a high number of COVID cases, and so our government takes preventive measures such as social distancing, wearing masks, and quarantine. However, these measures take time to achieve the desired effect of a reduction in new cases. So some people give up. They question whether social distancing is even effective or whether it is worthwhile to wear masks, and they do not continue taking these actions that in time could be highly effective. These are just a few examples of system archetypes. If you are interested in going further into this topic, I suggest that you read Peter Sinhe's book, The Fifth Discipline, which goes into greater detail on a number of systems architects and how to respond to them once we have identified them. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. Thank you very much.